What role does community place in our success?
Whatever success Milton Ranch has created over the years has depended a lot on the people we've been able to work with. Obviously we bring our work ethic and energy and purpose to the task, but I cannot list how many times my neighbors have bailed us out. And so the idea of having to taking care of your own place is not sufficient to me. I mean, I could be a success, but if people around me are cratering, it's not going to work. It's not going to be sustainable.
And how do we build those relationships to facilitate success?
Hard conversations, and it doesn't happen overnight, but it has been really reassuring to sit at the table. We just had a land committee meeting with the Nature Conservancy, and where the committee members are saying, well, what do you guys need out of this? And they're like, well, we need a conservation component, but what do you need? So it's nice to I feel like ranchers weren't always in the driver's seat. And I feel like we've been in the driver's seat on topics that are important to us a lot more. And I think that'll only grow.
All that and more on this episode 493 of the Working Cows podcast, brought to you by the Wineglass Ranch.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Hi, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows podcast. Very excited to be joined today by Bill Milton and Desi King. They are two of the people behind Winnett Aces. Bill has been on the ground since the beginning of Winnett Aces, an organization in Winnett, Montana that is working for community revitalization through agricultural success, among other things. And there's just a lot of components to it that maybe you don't always find in these kind of groups of grazing lands and coalitions and different things like that. They're unique, and they're going to be at the South Dakota Grassland Initiative Summit in March, and just wanted to, at least Desi's going to be there, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity to hear about the work that they're doing and maybe attend the summit and get connected with her there in the room and learn a little bit more about some of the work that they're doing to help foster that community. And Bill has been on the ground since the beginning, helping get the ACES group started, and his perspective is very unique from that regard as well. So here's my conversation with Bill Milton and Desi King. Desi, Bill, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation, and we're going to kind of talk about the work that Winnett Aces does, and then how that maybe has been shaped by or utilized on Bill's ranch as well. But among other things, those are kind of the direction that I wanted to head today. So, Desi, maybe I'll let you start introducing kind of Winnett Aces, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so Desi King, I'm the Conservation Programs Manager for Winnett Aces. Winnett Aces stands for Agricultural Community Enhancement and Sustainability. It was an acronym that was thrown together by one of our leadership members. Our mission is to strengthen our community by enhancing the health of the land, economy, and traditions for future generations. Typically, I say my elevator speech is like, we work to enhance community and conservation, and they work in coordination. So that's the Winnett Aces in a nutshell. We are located in Winnett, Montana, which is about an hour east of Lewistown, about 2 hours north of Billings, Montana. So in north central Montana. We say we're kind of split from our Rancher Stewardship Alliance by the river, so Missouri River. For our conservation work, we typically say we cover below the river, which is about 4 or 5 counties below the river, and Rancher Stewardship Alliance covers above the river. And our community side is really focused in Winnett. We just got into the Montana Main Street program, so the community is more focused on restoration within the community. We've restored, we're working on restoring an old Oddfellows building that The bottom part, the main part, has been restored and is an operating coffee shop and ice cream shop now. The top will be restored and it'll be housing for people to come in and out of the community if there's a visiting artist or MCC crew. And then supporting the county in restoring the courthouse, the Petroleum County Courthouse. And then the conservation branch typically does range improvement program projects with landowners as well as education for landowners. We have an education department that does education for landowners, school-age children, general public. She does anywhere from food safety to soil health and harvest of the month with students. We have a soil health department, soil health program. She does essentially consulting with landowners on soil health. She's done a flower farm. She's assisted general cow-calf operations in their soil health needs. And then we have the community enhancement division, which I already really explained. So that's kind of Winnett Aces in a nutshell.
Sure. Yeah.
In a nutshell, right, Bill?
Pretty good nutshell.
Yeah. So just to kind of define terms here, conservation can mean anything from planting trees and reduce tillage to regenerative agriculture and worm farming and applying compost tea, as I've recently learned. So, what would you say where kind of on that spectrum, or does that all of that fit into what Winnett Aces is focused on, or outside of the community and the cultural stuff? As far as agriculture goes, are you focused on all that?
Yep, our soil health specialist, Kendall Morgan, she has assisted landowners in developing a compost tea and vermicast, and applying that. She's currently at a compost workshop to learn more about that. Generally, for conservation, for what I do, and we have myself and then a conservation technician, is assistance with rangeland improvements. So we have conifer work where we're reducing encroachment of conifer, water systems for grazing systems, wildlife-friendly fence, either remove, replace, and we're trying to get that wildlife-friendly modifications, as well as restoring cropland back to native seed. So wanting to get that native range back out there.
Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today, the Wineglass Ranch. Coming February 25th to Oglala Livestock, a total age dispersion of the Wineglass Ranch Easy Keepers. The majority of these are going to be 3 and 4 year old single iron, home raised Wineglass Easy Keepers, developed in a intensive, non-selective rotational grazing system. They are adapted to excel in harsh environments. There will also be on offer 250 head of Angus and black whiteface heifers, again, single iron, home raised, and 150 head of red and red whiteface heifers, single iron, home raised. So quite the opportunity here coming your way February 25th at Oglala Livestock. For more information, visit wineglassranchinc.com. Yeah, Bill, could you share a little bit of your history with Winnett Aces and your experience?
You bet. So our family's been ranching in Muscle County, which is the county straight south of Petroleum, where Winnett's located. Been here since 78. My dad actually bought a ranch at 56, and he died pretty young. And some of us got sort of scattered out there. I worked on some ranches, but was able to invest in a ranch here in Muscle County in 78 with my wife and first daughter, and we've raised 3 kids. In fact, we're actually deep into a great succession project with the next generation. That's really exciting. So yeah, we're thinking of, working on moving that. So we've been here since 78. So I got sort of turned on to holistic management in the mid 80s. Went to a couple savory workshops, which had a bit of impact on how we approached our grazing practices. I been in love with grass my whole life. Um, and I could say we probably haven't done the same thing twice. You and many of the people you interview are in a state of like almost innovation on steroids. And so we're not unlike that community. And ACES, in its own unique kind of both ranching and culture and rural economic development, is like that as well. So, so moving toward ACES, which is about, I think, almost 10 years old now, pretty close to it.
Just about. Yep.
I've been involved along with doing interesting projects and working with a lot of different people and partners on our place. Been involved in a lot of collaborative efforts uh, in Montana and around the West, just trying to leverage sort of shared intelligence of communities to kind of advance and protect what's really important about these rural communities and ranch stewards and grasslands. And one of the projects was the Muscle Shell Watershed Coalition, which I got to work with Laura Nolan, who's the director of ACES. That's been an ongoing project for almost 16 years, where irrigators and agencies of folks been working to make sure water's delivered, infrastructure's taken care of, the river's taken care of. Well, Laura Nolan, was also really involved at the get-go with forming ACES, and ACES started growing so much that she had to leave the coalition and devote most of her activity, along with being a rancher herself with her family. And I was involved in the get-go with the first meeting of a few people in the community exploring, well, how could, the question was just, how could we maybe do a better job taking care of ourselves and addressing unmet needs? And, came out of that first meeting with a group of people ready to do beef in school. And within about 3 months, they had converted their school into like using local beef. And it was that kind of a can-do attitude that's been maintained over the last 10 years. And an interesting, cut on this, Clay, is that a lot of the motivation for ACES and ranchers organizing in our part of the world anyway, and not probably too unlike where you are. I get in the circle of the South Dakota Grassland Initiative, people struggling with policy, and the Central Grasslands Roadmap, involved with those folks too, is that there's just a lot of people who are interested in grasslands. And in our part of the world, there was a lot of NGO, TNC type folks, and National Wildlife Federation, Audubon, big NGOs, and others that kind of put a pin on central Montana as a place to do their work. And in those early years, there was a lot of tension, some conflict around just what that all meant. But what ACES and RSA have done is that they've been really clear about what's important to them in terms of protecting family agriculture and commitment to grassland, and developing pretty proactive, collaborative relationships with these other organizations that create kind of a mutual opportunity for the purpose of like someone like the Montana Nature Conservancies, which has been helping with grass banks in our area and providing opportunity for young people and regular family ranches to expand their grass operations. So they've been unique in that regard, which has really been cool for me to observe as both participant and then looking from afar. So we had, back 10, 15 years ago, had all these NGOs around here and you know how it goes. I mean, an NGO really wants to have an authentic presence. Well, how do you have an authentic presence? Well, you kind of have to deal with local people if you're really to be authentic. And it always bummed me a little bit that we had all these really powerful NGO, even international NGOs, that had large staff and large resources. And here we are out here in piles of millions of acres, ranchers, and we didn't have one FTE, not one full-time equivalent staff. It was actually a player. Now here we are between RSA and ACES. I think, must be between maybe 15 staff people between these two organizations that are hard after it. And now, and I think you can appreciate this, Clay, and these people have to kind of come through the filter of the local group to work in the area. They don't hey, we like to do this, and can you buy on? It's no, we're going to have to buy on before we really advance these projects. And it's collaborative, and it's good trust building, and it's just exciting in the uncertainty that we're all experiencing in America, and particularly in agriculture right now, to have communities, local geographies, of people really trying to leverage the capacity that they do have, but by leveraging and working and partnering, we want to protect these rural communities. We want to protect these grasslands. We want to protect family ranching. And this seems to be a particularly useful model to get that done.
Yeah, that seems to set Winnett Aces apart in my mind as far as the cultural and community engagement up to and including, if I understand right, renovating a space for, is it housing? I mean, is it kind of like short-term housing, or people coming into town just for a few days? Is that what that space, the vision for that space is to be?
Yeah, just needing space for short-term housing, and the courthouse will have housing and office space, so seeing the need for housing as well as office space. Like ACES currently is in a very small office, and there are 7 of us. So, we're looking forward to moving, but seeing the need that we needed some housing. The courthouse is affordable housing. The plan is, I think, for 3 years, the county has to provide affordable housing, and then that housing can be moved over to housing for anyone. We have a hard time in Winnett keeping housing for teachers, and the current housing is aging for the school that the school provides. And so the thought is potentially down the road, some of those apartments above the courthouse offices could be used for teachers, and be set aside to have the ability to bring teachers in.
And would you say that community focus springs from the holistic kind of three-legged stool of land, community, animals? Is that kind of where that comes from?
Yeah, definitely. And just, I think with the nonprofits, they're seeing the shared goal of keeping ranchers on the land and the benefit to wildlife as well as communities. There's a documentary coming out called World Without Cows that ACES was able to pre-screen, and the feedback that I provided them is they didn't elaborate as much how the beef industry provides for those local communities. There was a tribe in Africa that uses cattle as currency. For us, ranching is the largest industry in Petroleum County, and so we need somewhere to go get groceries. There's a few tire shops in Winnett. Now we have 2 different food places. So keeping that community thriving, not just surviving. That was kind of one of the um, points of getting ACES going, is how do we just take control of our future and keep people coming back and here on the land. So having that shared goal with those NGOs of, we want to keep people on the land. We see the benefit of having them there, of providing soil health and diverse plant communities that support wildlife as well as ranching and the community.
Hmm. Yeah, and it probably doesn't take a lot of education on the rancher's side. Like, hey, if this is available near you, make use of it. They're going to do that, right?
I think so. I think Bill brushed over it, and I'm going to tell the story because it brings a little comedy. When Bill was part of the group that got ACES going, and Laura, my boss, tells the story that he brought the TNC, the Nature Conservancy director, to a meeting, and she says, we didn't ask him to leave. Everyone was embarrassed to ask him to leave, but nobody wanted him there. And it was part of that building trust. Now before he left, he became a trusted advisor and supporter of ACES. His predecessor is a trusted advisor and has been assisting ACES in searching for property to purchase for a grass bank. That was another division we have, is the land division, which is looking at opportunities to purchase land to build a grass bank. There's a grass bank with the Nature Conservancy that's north of us, that would provide opportunities for young ranchers, as well as if there's a need for a rancher, like a fire comes through and they need other land, we would have that ability at a lower cost. So supporting our ranchers in many different ways.
And how are those grass banks going to be utilized?
Yeah, I think that it depends on where you're at. So the Nature Conservancy worked with Winnett Aces and Rancher Stewardship Alliance in the last couple of years to pursue a grant to and additional funding to purchase a ranch. Aces and RSA kind of had the wherever the ranch lands, that organization will take over management of it. So we found a ranch above the river. It's near is it near Turner? I think it's near Turner. It's called the Webb Ranch. So obviously it's above the river. The ranch went to Rancher Stewardship Alliance. They'll have a grass bank to provide for ranchers around that area. It'll also be used for educational purposes. I think for ACEs, similar situation. It also just depends on what the ranch that we're able to find. Is it going to be, if it's close to town and we can easily get people out to it, would it be beneficial to have a field school or some other facility there that provides for educational opportunities? Is it a little further out and it's best to support the ranchers near that property? So that'll kind of depend, but the goal is to provide opportunities for young producers to get into the business and have a bit of a leg up, as well as a place for us to, like I said, for a fire or other disaster, that we can have that available for people to utilize and still survive.
One way to think about it would be a destocking strategy where you've got a shortage of forage for whatever reason, and this is a place that is set aside where I don't know, is it like through an application process or something, or somebody can utilize that?
Right. It would probably be a application process, and then you would receive the way the grass bank, the Matador grass bank is set up is the landowners, the ranchers utilizing it receive incentives on their own for doing things on their own property. So if they're doing a water improvement or fence, they may receive assistance or a lower grazing rate for that year.
Sure. Yeah. And Bill, what has kind of been your perspective on the work that Winnett has been doing and kind of how it's played out? We could, you kind of gave us the history a little bit, but how has been the growth of the organization and the way that whole thing has played out over time?
I personally, as a rancher, have been really invested in taking care of grass and running the livestock business. But I've always appreciated how important neighbors, my rural community, my partners, I'll be the first one to say that, whatever success Milton Ranch has created over the years has depended a lot on the people we've been able to work with. Obviously we bring our work ethic and energy and purpose to the task, but I cannot list how many times my neighbors have bailed us out. And so the idea of having to taking care of your own place is not sufficient to me. I mean, I could be a success, but if people around me are cratering, it's not going to work. It's not going to be sustainable. The whole thing's got to work. So, a number of years ago, we started this forum called the Charlie M. Russell Community Working Group, which was a bunch of people, again, around this issue, so many issues in central Montana around wildlife and NGOs and land ownership and agencies, all that kind of stuff. And that went on for 10 or 15 years. But I'd always hoped that to really get at the problems that were being raised at those forums, you would need groups like ACES and RSA who were really grounded in a particular geography, in a particular community. They could see all these issues in context of their own personal situation and respond accordingly in unique kind of imaginative ways that their community could support and adopt. And so I see ACES, I mean, it just I just feel so good about ACES because now we have this presence of in a very short period of time, a very sophisticated nonprofit organization that's run by ranchers who have great capacity and vision and are comfortable working in new situations and working with different kinds of people to figure out whatever it takes to make their community work and their landscape be healthy, and that their family ranchers can prosper into multiple generations in the future. And I think they're doing a marvelous job. And the need is so great. I mean, we were talking about these grass banks and land. I mean, no surprise to you in your part of the world that it's very concerning who is going to be owning agricultural land in America. And I say, if you had a choice between trying to buy a ranch or to save a ranch, first let's just frickin' save this. let's just make sure that people who are out there have the best chance possible to continue their operations by sharing our expertise, providing resources to improve infrastructure, creating grass banks. Now, let's make sure we can protect the core. At the same time, how can we create more opportunities for young people to come into a capital intensive uh, business like agriculture? And again, ACES, and it's the other cool thing is, I mean, they're all fairly middle-aged young people. And surprisingly, most of them, well, all of them are women in terms of the staff. And I find in the work over the years, working with working groups, that women are bringing a particular unique aspect of leadership uh, to this task. They just have a way of thinking about things beyond their own particular situation a little better than we men sometimes. There's just a little less ego in that part of the side of the gender than ours.
Yep.
So I think that works to their advantage. And so I think ACES is actually very primed to have is having an impact and to have a larger impact. And I just like to see more of these kind of neighborhood community processes evolve over all the Northern Plains.
Sure. Bill, have you had success helping neighbors succeed, be profitable, be regenerative? Pick your word for the metric, but have you had success with that? I mean, you said if I'm thriving but my neighbors are struggling, I'm not. I don't feel like I feel like there's more to be done if that's the case. So have you had success with that or have experience working in that way?
Well, yes, and well, see how would I describe this? Both actual neighbors and then ACES is part of being a neighborhood. I mean, with ACES, like for instance, might be a good time to talk about one of the projects of ACES. It's called the Rangeland Monitoring Group, and that's a group of ranchers, and they actually have some part-time staff supporting this. We worked on this for almost 10 years, and now it's really starting to get some wheels under it. And that's where community ranchers have hired a third person to monitor our places and do range monitoring, and then get together once a year and talk about like what's working. How is our rangelands improving? So we're directly using each other's experience and skill and history to try to advance all of our practices in terms of how we graze animals on our land. So that's a very concrete one that is allowing people to share experience and bring people in so we can improve our practices as grazers. Like with a neighbor, actually we had a neighbor who got an EQIP project to do some water improvements, and he ended up buying a ditcher and made that investment. And we ended up getting an EQIP contract. And so we were able to contract with our neighbor, which added a lot of value to his business to do a lot of the contract work on our place. And then now I'm leasing ground from another neighbor who really wants to, had old CRP ground, wanted to get some grazing on it and try to build more diversity. And he ended up working with the same neighbor to like build some pipelines. So, that's a great example of like well, we're improving ground, improving infrastructure. We're using local people's equipment and skills to do it. And so, yeah. And then it's interesting, we started using electric fence way back in the 80s, made plenty of mistakes. I think we're getting pretty smooth with it now. But it was interesting over the years. Occasionally you'd see someone's put in a 2-wire electric fence, someone else sort of, and, people kind of look, like weren't too excited. But sometimes you don't really, you just do what you do, and certainly don't judge other people. We make plenty of mistakes, but what's exciting, play in our neighborhood, I was just sharing this with someone. We came in '78. Almost all the ranch families that we neighbor with are still here. They've all gone through different levels of succession. We're going through ours, and that can't be said for every neighborhood. So anyway, we love our neighborhood. When it comes to fires and all kinds of things, gets back to the question: if you think you can take care of stuff on your own, well, you usually find out pretty quickly that that's not a very useful approach.
Yeah. Yeah. My family and I moved out into a neighborhood similar to yours, and my father-in-law and my mother-in-law, both of them come out together to church every Sunday with us. I always say my wife's a single mom on Sundays, and so they come sit with her. Now that all the kids are grown, it's a little easier. But anyways, they still enjoy it. And one of the things that my father-in-law said repeatedly when he came out here is these people have to depend on each other to survive. And that's true. I think of like branding season. How much of the branding season wouldn't get accomplished if neighbors weren't there? And then you give the catastrophic examples, fire, or there's an illness that hits or an injury that hits during haying season. And then you've got eight cutters and 4 or 5 balers that show up and knock out, a hayfield in an afternoon or whatever, So, I mean, it's just, it is remarkable. And that is always a one of the things that makes these neighborhoods so strong. For sure. So I appreciate that. Desi, you're going to be speaking at the South Dakota Grassland Initiative coming up here in a few weeks. And kind of what is your focus? What will you be sharing about there?
I'll be talking about, I say conservation community, and they're very intertwined. And we've been standing on our soapbox for the last couple of years of like, they can't be separated. We have organizations that want to support conservation on the ground, and maybe sometimes the community side gets forgotten about. And also, Bill mentioned that our staff is primarily women. One of the things that Winnett saw a need for is daycare, and being able to. I think one of the board members always says they never thought talking conservation that they'd be looking at a daycare. Well, if you can't keep teachers in the school teaching, if you can't keep staff working, it limits us. It limits the whole community. And so having the ability to put dollars on the ground as far as conservation and supporting ranchers in doing a new water system that will help them be more sustainable, or bringing a daycare into the community, they're all intertwined, right? And we have many people that have connections to the ranch, but also have other jobs, or by necessity or by desire. And those those are all interconnected. So that's really what I really try and focus on, is they're interconnected. We say that there's a group out of Oregon called Wallowa Resources. And we say when we grow up, we want to be like Wallowa Resources, because they've just expanded their range and weed division. They've done workplace housing because they saw the need for it. And I think that just reiterates, right, that this is not just conservation can't be separated. Range improvement, you can't just do the range improvements and you're going to support the community. You have to have those housing, daycare, facilities for people to have meetings, facilities for them to have office space. So that's what I'll be speaking on when we go to South Dakota Grasslands Summit.
I think that'll be a really helpful piece. Like you said, this is really all about, or one of the things, maybe it's not all about it, but one of the things that it is about is revitalizing and helping these rural communities thrive. And, I'm sure Montana is similar to South Dakota. Each of the 5 sectors of agriculture in South Dakota bring more money to the state individually than the second, which is tourism, by itself, by themselves. So, I mean, it is just far and away, agriculture is the largest driver of prosperity in our state, and so the more rural the state, the more true that is, I think. And so with Montana being similar, to South Dakota, I'm sure it's similar there, where as agriculture thrives, these rural communities thrive. Bill, is that true in your estimation?
Oh, it's certainly certainly a huge component. As you get closer, we're between Winnett and Billings, which is the largest community in Montana. So in the Roundup community, of which we're closest to, that's about 50 plus miles out of Billings, there's more of a blending of different kinds of ways people make money. But, from Winnett east all the way to South Dakota, North Dakota, yes, the wherewithal of these, how these ag communities uh, uh, prosper or not, has a huge impact. I mean, you go back to the 80s, and you've heard the story when they did uh, the CRP program, where you know, I mean, we could have I know we could have multiple talks, and you'd have them on the farm program, and how that some side de-incentivizes entrepreneurship out here in our ag deal. But anyway, when a lot of those farmers, you know, because of that program wanting to reduce the acreage of grains, that they're still feeling the hit, all the way back to the 80s. And then, of course, the 80s were just tough. And I look back and kind of curious how we even survived them, and how many people, how many families left agriculture during that period. And now that we're here, we didn't have a group like ACES or RSA. We didn't have ways of being maybe more creative of supporting each other back then that we do now. And I'd like to think when the next drought hits or the next market crunch hits, that we're building resilience into our collective capacity as a community, that we hopefully would respond more effectively to letting people, hopefully keep people holding on until things change.
Yeah, I mean, and just look at the way that the withering of those rural communities coincided with the stress of the 80s, right? I mean, you could walk down Main Street, Belfouche, South Dakota, in the 80s, and every shop was full, and there was a Sears, and there was a JC Penney, and there was a Hardware Hank, and you just keep, and then there was a bunch of locally owned clothing stores and restaurants and all that stuff. And I mean, it's gone backwards for a long time, and now through the intentional effort of more like a chamber of commerce type outfit, they've started to bring that downtown area back. But it is, it does take that intentional effort, whoever it is. Now, I think we all agree here, agriculturalists, ranchers would be the ones that would be well suited to do that as well, and also have a vested interest in the success of their own rural community. And so, yeah, hats off to Winnett Aces and the work that they've been doing. And I guess maybe we'll just kind of point towards wrapping up here and think about what does the future look like in your mind, Desi, and also you, Bill. What are you focused on? What are the things that are kind of capturing your attention going forward?
Yeah, so for ACEs, so my background is I actually worked for Nevada Cattlemen's Association for a few years, and it's been 15 years now. Wow, 14 years. But the collaboration between partners has changed, and the viewpoint of ranchers and the partnership with those organizations and state agencies, federal agencies, NGOs, all alike, that has changed immensely in that time frame. I think we're really seeing how not only keeping ranchers on the land and at their local place, but how much they provide for wildlife, for the public to be utilizing that land. So I anticipate there will be more maybe incentives for ranchers that are providing that down the road. I think that the partnerships with NGOs and agencies can only grow. Like I said, it's been 14 years for me, and just seeing a huge difference in that time frame. I really appreciate that partnership, and it takes a lot of trust and hard conversations, and it doesn't happen overnight. But it has been really reassuring to sit at the table. We just had a land committee meeting with the Nature Conservancy, and where the committee members are saying, well, what do you guys need out of this? And they're like, well, we need a conservation component, but what do you need? So it's nice to I feel like for many years, and like I said, I worked in lobbying, so it's a different view, but for many years, ranchers weren't always in the driver's seat. And I feel like we've been in the driver's seat on topics that are important to us a lot more. And I think that'll only grow. And I think with the support of groups like South Dakota Grasslands, Winnett ACES, Rancher Stewardship Alliance, Wallowa Resources, Blackfoot Challenge, we have that core working group that's able to facilitate that with staff members and then leadership like Bill and our board members. So I think that I think the view of those partnerships and the ability of them to grow is just beginning.
Yeah, Bill, what's your perspective on future and where we're headed?
Yeah, what a big question. I was just reading the other day where someone said, begin with the end in mind. And so if I was to approach this beginning with the end in mind, I see the future. Well, what will be required in the future is to have groups like a Winnett type ACES and these other working groups that we work with across the state of Montana, and I work with some across the West. But this model of building the capacity of communities to leverage their capacity, their skills, their intentions, their just love for place, that we have to figure out how to build more neighborhood approaches for taking care of landscapes. And what goes along with that is not only protecting this community of stewardship that takes care of place and takes care of each other. But I think I'm starting to think one of the most important things, and I've been thinking about this a lot of late in terms of where we see our country, and we're having a little tough time kind of leveraging our skills in this country to get useful things done, is that I think these places, these working groups like ACES and RSA and Blackfoot Challenge and others across the West, this is where the culture of democracy is actually being reimagined, where you have people of different points of view in a community developing sort of unorthodox forms of governance. We work with our county commissioners, we work with our city councils. It's not like we're trying to replace that decision-making process. But the idea that a community can figure out how to create the safety and trust to have really hard conversations about what's important, and to do it in a thoughtful, respectful way where good decisions could be made and people move forward on the decisions they can make that they can agree on, and difficult ones that they can't, they put to side. They don't use that, as they call that 80-20 rule. They don't use that 20% to keep them perpetually divided. Like I think what's happening. We what's that 70-80% that we pretty much are on board? Let's move forward. And as we move forward, we develop better relationships. We develop more confidence in ourselves to solve problems. And this is how human cultures prosper and survive. That's how they survived at the beginning. That's how they will survive in the future. And if what we're doing here could be a story for the rest of America to maybe take a look at, is like, hey, we got to take care of where we live, got to somehow stay in conversation with each other. We have to respect we all came from different places. We got to respect that we have our own conditioning. But besides that, we're all, as Desi was saying, this is all interdependent. We all have to work with each other. None of us are solo machines out of here that can take care of ourselves and others. And so I think this is really an important cultural experience in America. And I see it happen around the world. Is the way you're going to take care of the planet is one neighborhood at a time. And we just need to develop more of these neighborhoods. And I think we'll see great progress. And I think people start enjoying their life. And that's one thing you find, when you hear about so much conflict and people fighting, you go to these meetings at RSA and ACES, and if there's one thing you can experience all the time, is a lot of laughter, a lot of smiling, a lot of just people enjoying their lives. I mean, we're only here for a while. Let's try and enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. When we rub shoulders around the 80% that we agree on, then sometimes we can even develop understanding on the 20% that we don't agree. It's like, oh, now I know where you're coming from and how you got there and why you landed there, and that becomes a useful tool, right?
Yeah, no, I'm excited. Well, I'm worried too, to be honest. I'm kind of worried about the future right now, but
Yep.
But I'm excited that I can work in a place in which people are working together and they're actually getting tangible stuff done.
Yeah, so March 3rd and 4th, South Dakota Grassland Initiative Summit, South Dakota Grassland Summit, put on by the South Dakota Grassland Initiative, will be taking place in Mitchell, South Dakota. If you're interested in that, you can find more information at the link in the show notes page for today. But Bill, Desi, thanks for your time today.
Thank you. This is great opportunity. Good luck with your program.
Yeah, thanks, Clay.
Very good stuff there. Really appreciate just the unique approach that they're taking and the holistic approach that they're taking into account all of the different aspects of community and agriculture, and helping all of those things fit together in a way that makes the local community thrive more completely. And I think that's just a very interesting approach that you don't hear very often. So appreciate them taking the time to share that with us. Coming up next on the Working Cows podcast, I'm going to share with you a conversation that I had with Jim Idle. We're going to talk about how he's come back to land that his family's owned for a long time, but he's the first generation in many generations to manage it, and how he's been revitalizing that, and the importance of good economic data, financial analysis tools in helping them accomplish that. So look forward to sharing that with you real soon on another episode of the Working Cows podcast. We'll see you then.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.